All right, here we go, everyone. Another awesome episode of the All Around Adventure podcast. And I'm excited to be talking with Kerry Macuska today, the creator and author of the travel blog, Kerry Somewhere. Kerry, thanks so much for taking time for joining me today, and welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to chat today.
Yeah, I've been looking forward to having you on. You know, you and I have actually been connected for a good while in the world of social media. We kind of run in the same travel blogging circles, and we've been kind of following each other for a long time. But now here we are, finally getting a chance to collaborate. And I think we're actually both Floridians, I believe, as well. You've been in Florida pretty much most of your life, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I was born and raised in Florida. Were you born and raised in Florida as well?
Well, I'm a little bit of a transplant. I was actually born and raised in Michigan, but I've been living in the Panhandle for going on about 3 years now. And I'd say it was a pretty good move. You know, I'm not a fan of winter, especially not in my adult years. So I'm kind of digging the much warmer weather vibes of Florida for sure.
That's great. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Well, you've covered a lot of ground as a traveler, and it's just, we're probably not going to get into everything today, but I'm certainly looking forward to hearing some of your stories. But so let's kind of go back in time a little bit here, and I just kind of want to open it up with what actually inspired you to become a world traveler in the first place.
Yeah. So I had hardly been anywhere. I'm turning 38 this month. So I'm a little bit of a late bloomer in the travel world, because I think most people start, if they're long-term traveling or they're traveling a lot, they usually start in their 20s and they're backpacking and, partying it up around the world. And I was focused on the corporate world throughout my 20s and early 30s, landed this job where I started working from home, and their headquarters were in India, and I was sent to India 3 times. So the first time was about 6.5 years ago, and I had hardly been anywhere traveling. There was like a good almost 10 years when I didn't even have a passport, as a lot of people from the US can also understand, right? Because a lot of Americans don't go anywhere. And so yeah, I just, they flew me to India. And before that, prior to that, I traveled extensively through the US for work. I'd been to Canada and I'd been to the UK, but just going to India was just mind-blowing, and I loved it so much. And I just told myself, I want to travel more. So I started maximizing my vacations slowly. And then since I was working remotely, I just decided I was going to maybe combine vacations with a little bit of working remotely while I was abroad. And it just slowly escalated from there. So it started about 6.5 years ago.
Okay, right on. So following this experience to India and then getting the travel bug from there, what were some of the places that you looked at from there that you wanted to go see? Can you kind of take us through some of your earlier travel memories? What were some places that you chosen to go to?
Yeah, so some of my earlier travel memories. So when I first getting started, I spent a lot of time in Europe. I just felt like that was just some of the easiest places that I could go to as a solo traveler.
Sure, yeah.
I think a lot of people start that way. My company has sent me a few times to Europe as well for work. And so I would just say, hey, I'm going to take a week or 2 off and just keep exploring. So I'd go to Germany for a conference. And then when the conference was done, I'd be off of work for a week or 2 and just take the train around and go to different places. So that's kind of where I really initially started. I'm also a big fan of European football, so I'm a huge Liverpool supporter. And so
yeah, I saw that in your blog for sure, and your social media accounts as well.
Yeah, yeah. Well, a lot of Americans don't really know much about it, but if they do know anything about football or soccer, then they'll definitely know what it is. So it's funny because sometimes people will say to me, oh, wow, you're a huge supporter. I'm like, how do you even know about this? You're from this country, but it's growing here, but yeah, so one of my first solo trips was going over to watch a game, because, it's a big trip for Americans to go. I didn't really know any international supporters. I know a lot from traveling now. But so one of my first solo trips was traveling over to England to watch a game and watching 2 games actually, and going all over. And now I write blog posts on how to get tickets and just as a supporter, how to navigate around and what to do when you're visiting the country and the city and stuff. And so a lot of Liverpool supporters follow me for travel advice. It's kind of funny how it's grown into that. But that's my niche for sure.
All right. Well, okay. So what was it about Liverpool that, draw you to become the biggest supporter that you are? Not saying that that's a bad choice by any means, of course, but you just made me curious all of a sudden.
So are you familiar with soccer as well?
Yeah, actually, I don't know if I mentioned this when you and I were connecting, but I did live in England for a year myself. I was based in York. And I don't think York has a football team actually, but I mean, I know some of the different teams out there. There's Liverpool, there's Manchester United, there's Chelsea, and a few others. I mean, I would occasionally maybe catch a game here and there, but I don't think I really found myself back in a team quite to the level that you have. But yeah, I am aware of football in the UK for sure. So what was it about Liverpool that made you become the big supporter that you are?
Okay, yeah, if you lived over there, then you're definitely familiar. When I said I had been to the UK prior to going to India, which was really my first big international trip, I had spent some time in Liverpool and fell in love with the city. And I just grew up playing the sport, so I know it very well. I'm very familiar with the players. And one of my favorite players back then, who played for the England national team, also played for Liverpool, Michael Owen, just in case anybody is listening who actually really knows anything. But yeah, and so I just started following, and it was 20 years ago, actually. And it's just kind of crazy. And the city of Liverpool is just very unique. I mean, you lived in York, so Northern England is so different from the South. And a lot of people don't really realize that because a lot of people only go to London and they're only in the South, and the accent up in the north is so different. So York, Manchester, Liverpool will all sound so different. And then you could even go in between those cities and the accents are so different and the culture is different. It's crazy. Just how different it is in just such a little space, So I love the city. I loved the players, and it was just easy to start following, and my following just grown over the years. And I like traveling in my Liverpool jersey because people will stop me and talk to me because it's such a global sport. If I go to Africa and I'm wearing a Liverpool jersey, people stop me and talk to me. Egypt, one of the big players is Egyptian. Even Latin America, they mostly follow La Liga, Barcelona, Real Madrid, but people will stop me and say, "Oh, Liverpool, that's a really good football club. Congratulations on winning Champions League," and stuff like that. So it's a really good conversation starter for when you're traveling. That's one of the reasons why I wear my jersey all the time.
Right. Well, it's interesting how much football is spread around the globe. And of course, we have the World Cup every 4 years. So I guess that, it shouldn't become too much of a surprise. But I remember when I was in Africa, I lived in West Africa for 2 years when I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And it was the same thing like you just described when you were in Africa too. You see a lot of the children there especially, would have small jerseys of various British football teams. So I always thought that was that was kind of cool. So you said you had spent some time in England before you kind of ventured on more of this solo trip. What brought you there for around this time, when you were younger?
So that's a really good question. So my dad was working for a company in Orlando that also had an office in the UK. And so I spent a lot of time, I spent a semester in high school there and then some time over the summer before I went off to college over there. So I did a lot of exploring. It was really the first time I was overseas, and it was way before I was a solo traveler. I was young and, going to go. My mom had gone back and forth with my dad too. So that's kind of how it happened. That was my first overseas trip, and it was with my family.
Okay. So opportunity kind of presented itself and you were able to capitalize on some cool stuff. So right
Yeah.
on. So kind of fast forwarding a little bit to, again, going into India and then finding your way in and around Europe a little bit more in depth, especially, and you were doing this as a solo female traveler at this point. And now one thing I kind of wanted to ask you, and I like to ask this question for the women that come on my show, because there's a lot of women that I have in my life, they'll hear stories from me or maybe from bloggers like yourself, and they like the idea of going out and traveling, but, they're often, afraid to do so, especially by themselves, And so I'm just wondering, like, was safety a concern that you had when you kind of started bumping out in the world by yourself? And if so, how did you kind of deal with that, if you don't mind my asking?
So that's a really good question. I think because you're on Instagram a lot as well. I think what happens, I got a lot of my travel ideas from Instagram and not necessarily from other solo female travelers. So I made the mistake of following other people that weren't traveling the same way I was traveling and taking advice from them. And I actually got burned a couple times. I got into some seriously sticky situations where I just wish that I would have maybe asked a solo female traveler or something for their advice, or maybe followed more. So I think that's the best advice I can give to any solo female traveler for safe travel safety advice, is to read blog posts and read Instagram posts or Pinterest, because a lot of, I think, solo female travelers or just female travelers in general get their advice from Instagram and Pinterest, is to follow other travelers that are traveling the same way, and not just traveling solo, but there's a big difference between traveling as a luxury traveler and then as a budget traveler, as I'm sure you know as well.
Right.
Even as a male traveler, you have so much of a buffer when you're traveling in luxury, because you've got, resort hotel staff, you've got, gated hotels with security and stuff like that. And then if you're a budget traveler, it's not like that. Like, you're doing self check-in with Airbnb half the time, especially during COVID. And then, you're taking buses and you're taking trains. And in some countries where, we don't blend in, where I don't, there's countries I've been to where women just aren't they're just not treated the same as men. And I'm completely fine because I'm prepared now. But initially I wasn't scared, only because I looked at all these photos of people traveling and I was like, wow, they're saying Colombia is completely safe. I should just go. And I did, and I went, and I had some major issues in Colombia. And I love Latin America. I mean, I've been posting like crazy about Mexico, as you've seen, and I've had minimal issues in Mexico. But I had some major issues in Colombia, and on Instagram, bloggers rave about Colombia all the time.
Mm-hmm.
But I truly do think that my experiences that I'll have as a solo female traveler will be different than someone who's either booking with a tour, someone that's traveling with a man, or someone that's traveling with even someone else, or traveling just with a group. It's just going to be different. Every single scenario I can go back to where I was in a sticky situation, almost every time I can think about it. I'm like, if I was with someone else, this probably wouldn't have happened. Or if I was with a tour group or something, this probably wouldn't have happened.
Right. Well, there's a little bit of a dichotomy with Instagram, I'd say, and other social media platforms. You brought up Pinterest, where it's like, you kind of see all these amazing experiences and you can get really inspired by a lot of these ideas and, images, videos that you see. But I think the potential pitfalls that you can fall into there is that, we usually have a tendency to share only the highlights, where I think pretty much any traveler out there can pick out a couple of misadventures that they've had along the way, but they may be reluctant to share that, maybe out of embarrassment or, whatever the case may be, but they'll still only share the highlights from in some places like Colombia or, wherever else where they might have had some issues. And so I think that's probably something that, people ought to be aware of too, is that you're getting the highlight reel when you pull your your ideas and inspirations from social media. But and that's why I always appreciate, bloggers and influencers like yourself who are pretty transparent and, kind of address these issues. You've brought up the issue of safety in your most recent trip to Mexico on some of your posts and things along those lines too. But I'd say that's sometimes the exception, not necessarily, the rule with a lot of travel bloggers and influencers out there.
Yeah, no, definitely. I feel that with some of your points, you were saying that, a lot of people are just sharing the highlights sometimes. And it's true. So I posted something considered controversial on Instagram. I did 3 segments in a row about a country where I was sexually harassed nonstop in the country. And I received a lot of interesting feedback. On one hand, there was a lot of other female supporters chiming in saying that they experienced the same thing. And I was like, why don't you see this a lot in other places? Like, why aren't you seeing other people posting about this on Instagram about their experiences? Because it's kind of like the highlights. And then I also think sometimes people don't want to shed a bad light on a country because sometimes the media already sheds enough of a bad light. Right. And I completely understand that. And one of the reasons why I didn't initially share my story is for that reason. And then also just sometimes people want to make it like, if you're making money off your website, you want to encourage people to travel. So if you're telling people, hey, it's kind of risky to travel here, then you're kind of like scaring people from going there, So right. I think a lot of people, sometimes they're like, should I really share this information? Because am I going to be scaring people off from travel? And I don't want to scare people off either, but I want to help people travel safely. So I decided to start sharing my story anyways. And it's crazy. My Instagram post that I was sharing about this controversy of I was harassed nonstop near Petra and Wadi Rum, traveling alone as a woman. And that's one of the places where I mentioned that I took all my advice from people who were traveling with others. And so walking around as a woman alone, it was just interesting. I was in Petra 2 days in a row. One day I spent walking around with another male traveler that I had met from Thailand, what's funny is he's a Manchester United supporter. He walked up to me and started talking to me about football. And we just walked around Petra. I know, this is why I told you I wear my jersey. We walked around Petra all day. And then the next, just taking photos with each other. It was just a lot of fun. And then the next day, I was by myself and it was a completely different experience. There's this big romance scam thing that goes on in Jordan. You could find
I just had to tilt my head there. Now you got me intrigued. Anyway, carry on, please.
No, it's crazy. I'll have to send you the Instagram account. There's a lot of stories from female travelers where there's some sort of romance scams. It's difficult to explain, but you'll see the stories. If you look on TripAdvisor and even in some blog posts and stuff, you'll find them. There's one account on Instagram that posts all of the anonymous stories from females that are traveling alone and have dealt with this issue. But I don't know why, I traveled around the whole country and I really didn't have major issues until I was in Petra and Wadi Rum. It was just the kind of the culture there. They're, it's like, let's do this sort of tourist scam thing on women. And so it was just a big shock to me and it was really difficult to deal with. And so I think you hit the nail on the head when you said sometimes people are just sharing the highlights there. And I think though that when I started sharing the controversial topic and started sharing this, my engagement went up on those posts. It was just crazy. I had so many comments, other females chiming in saying they had the same experience. Some females saying they didn't have the same experience, which is fine because I don't think anyone has the same experience when they're traveling. And then some locals were really mad at me. And then when I started talking to them through DM, they said, oh, we know that this goes on here. And I'm like, why are you mad at me? So it's interesting when you actually do share the raw, honest truth about some things.
Yeah, absolutely. And because, the stuff that you may be concerned about with when it comes to travel or safety concerns or maybe just other general concerns as well too. If you're experiencing those concerns, there's a very good chance that there's tons of other people out there that are concerned about the exact same thing. So when you kind of speak about those and you're transparent about those, I'd say those do go a long way with like many people. And, you know, case in point, your engagement has gone up significantly when you were very transparent about, you know, a lot of these misadventures and stuff like that you had along the way. But, you know, kind of transitioning from misadventures, you know, let's talk about some highlights. I mean, again, we're probably not going to get into everything in this this episode. So we'll just encourage everyone to go check out your blog when they're done listening to this if they want to hear more stories. But what are some key highlights from some of your adventures that kind of stand out in your mind?
So I'm mostly an adventure traveler. You know, budget adventure, not luxury. My favorite areas of the world have been Africa. I love the Middle East and I love Latin America. So for some reason, I love traveling to some of the most difficult areas of the world. But I find it to be the most rewarding because, you know, it's like the media will present the world in one way, but when you get out there and travel, you can find out the truth for yourself.
Right.
So yeah, I think some highlights, and a lot of the stuff that I put out there focuses a lot on wildlife. So I love African safaris, gorilla trekking. I've seen the Komodo dragons in Indonesia. I don't know. I love animals. So anytime I see a monkey or anything, I just get so excited. I know not everyone's into animals, but I love wildlife. And then also I love hiking and just adventurous stuff. So I'm really into, you know, I went hiking up a volcano in Guatemala and camped out and just saw lava flowing all night from the volcano next to where I was at. And so that was one of the best things I've ever done. And then I also really love ancient Egyptian history. So I usually go to Egypt every year ever since I first went. And didn't get a chance to go this year because I was supposed to go in April, which is not the best time to go. But I was in East Africa the whole time. So I was like, when I'm done with East Africa, I'll just fly to Egypt. It's starting to get too hot, but at least I can squeeze that in a little bit. But so I love ancient Egyptian history too. So I think that's a lot of the types of things that I'm putting together. And if anyone were to glance at my account or my blog, they'd see a lot of that.
All right, right on. You know, speaking of Egypt, I was talking with a colleague of mine. You know, I mentioned before we hit record here that I'm an archaeologist by day, and I was talking with a colleague of mine who's an Egyptologist, and I actually haven't had the fortune of going yet, but it's just kind of hearing like some of his stories about ancient Egypt and kind of some of like his research and things like that. I'm just thinking, you know, it was nice to live vicariously through him, but that made me all the more envious to kind of go myself. But so if you don't mind, I kind of want to zoom in on Egypt for a second here. And I guess, what are some like highlights from Egypt that you remember?
So I've done the typical touristy stuff. My first ever trip, what's funny is I've never done one prepackaged tour except for in Egypt. And I did that because it was one of my very first trips to, I think it might have been the first predominantly Muslim country I've ever visited. And, you know, being a woman traveling alone and just the media and everything, I was like, oh, I have to book a prepackaged tour. Like I can't just roam around like I do in Europe. So I booked a 1-week tour to go to Cairo and Luxor. Have you been to Egypt before?
Not yet, no.
Yeah. So
I know of the places that you just mentioned. So
people post about it all the time and they write about it. Yeah. I just loved it so much. But when I was on the tour, I realized I actually don't need to have a tour. You don't walk around and see terrorism or anything. Like it's not like what people think. Like, oh my God, you're going to Egypt. Be careful, because I went a couple years ago and they still hadn't recovered from the 2011 Arab Spring and the uprisings. So tourism was down and all Egyptians were like, please tell people to start coming back. Like we miss them, you know, it's so safe here. And I was walking around and there was hardly anybody at the pyramids. I could get photos in front of the Sphinx and the pyramids in the middle of the day with like no one there. And this was like in January. So it's actually nice to be there in the middle of the day. And then I went to Luxor, which is really quiet. And it was just really nice and just quiet. Hardly any tours. But the last couple times I've been, it's just been really, really, really getting busy. And then the last 2 times I went, I did a little bit more. I went down to Aswan and then I went all the way down to Abu Simbel. So I've taken really the train all the way from Cairo by myself, because the last 2 times I didn't take a prepackaged tour. I was like, I don't need this anymore. And I haven't taken one any other, country. And I just went all the way from Cairo down to Aswan, and then went all the way down to Abu Simbel. And Abu Simbel is my favorite. I don't know if you've seen any photos, but it's just, you've got just these giant statues of Ramesses, and it's just incredible. It's just, I don't know, it's just every time I walk around in these ancient temples and just seeing the statues, I just think it's so incredible and amazing.
Oh, right on. I think there's certain pros and cons to like prepackaged tours like that. I've only done one, and that was in Morocco, and I did it with my brother and I. And I think we kind of chose it because, when I was living in living in Gambia at the time, and I had very limited access to internet. So basically, the most quickest and efficient way to like get something to go there. And it was also nice that that all the logistics were taken care of. Going to the Atlas Mountains and to the Sahara Desert. But for all intents and purposes, kind of going back to your original point, how certain things like the media tend to kind of really inflate a lot of things. I don't know if that's the right word, but that's kind of what I'll go with here. And but once you're actually on the ground and you see it for yourself, it's not really what a lot of these sources, really make it out to be. And I certainly experienced that when I went to West Africa myself. It's just when I told people I was going to Africa, it's just like they almost just blanket all African countries as if they're just like the same country. But we're talking a massive continent here. So it's just really funny how that works out sometimes. But so at what point, did you kind of go from, traveling like this solo, and, you covered a lot of ground, you mentioned you spent some time in Southeast Asia, Africa, and all of these places. But at what point did you begin to transition to doing this full time and kind of doing this digital nomad thing as you are now?
Yeah, that's a good question. So after just dabbling in travel here and there for about 3 years, because I started about 6.5 years ago. It was May 2017 when I decided to go full time. So a few months before that, I was thinking about it, and I only had an apartment. I had a lease. I was living in Orlando, and I'm in my just early, almost mid 30s. And I'm like, I'm not nowhere getting married or having kids. And I'm like, why not? I'm like, I love traveling. I work remotely. I maneuvered it so I could start working as a freelancer. So I've gone back and forth between working directly for a company and then working as a freelancer in the education technology industry. So that's how I've been a digital nomad. I've got some stuff on my blog just kind of explaining like my degree and what I've done, and how I've transitioned to remote work and just even as a freelancer. So I just slowly prepared for all of that, did a whole bunch of research on, what are the best places to go. And then sometimes I would read stuff and I'm like, I don't even know if I want to go there. Like, I really want to go to these places that don't have a lot of good Wi-Fi. Kind of like you were talking about West Africa. What's funny is I've had to avoid a lot of Africa because of that, because I am working when I'm traveling. Some places are better than others. But I was looking at even West Africa. Actually, I was thinking about maybe going next year. So I thought that was really interesting. I'll have to get with you because I was looking at Gambia and Senegal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
But the problem is a lot of these places don't have good Wi-Fi, or you have to kind of stick to the cities where you'll have good Wi-Fi, but the cities don't really have anything. You want to be out in nature. And so it's just kind of like, it's just interesting. But so I did a ton of research, and then I slowly got rid of everything. And that was the weird part, is us Americans, we have a lot of stuff, and we're big on having a nice big home, having a nice fancy car. A lot of countries, when we're traveling, we notice this. People just live simple, and a lot of times, and they don't need to spend a lot of money on things, but we do. It's our culture. Not everyone falls into that trap, and some of us maybe fall into it for a little while and then maybe don't. Some of us, it's okay. I think if someone is into things and buying stuff, I'm not judging at all. I just realized that once I gave up a lot of stuff, it was a huge relief, but it was weird initially doing that. Cause I was like, I'm going homeless. I'm a female. I'm getting rid of all of my high heels and my fancy dresses. And like, I'm not going to be traveling in high heels and these nice fancy dresses and designer handbags, you know? So it's like I'm gave up everything. And it was, at first it was really scary, but then it was liberating after some time. And I was like, yes, I'm traveling with just this bag and this is awesome. Like, I feel so free. So
yeah, well, it's interesting. And, you know, I like that you use the term liberating, because I've used that term myself when I've kind of, you know, experienced the same thing. It's one of those things that it actually takes you actually having to make that leap to, you know, kind of get rid of a lot of stuff. I guess I'll say, you know, really kind of just sort of lighten your load, so to speak. And I certainly experienced that when I was in Africa. When I moved to Africa for 2 years, it was whatever I can fit into 2 check bags and a carry-on. And I actually came back with less stuff than what I went out there with, surprisingly enough, too. But it's just once I actually realized, okay, I actually don't need the latest and greatest smartphone or the latest and greatest, you know, TV. You know, it's like, I mean, because like, what is it like they do with TVs? It's like they just add like an extra D for high def or something like that. And once that happens, people feel like they got to upgrade to that all of a sudden, you know? And again, you know, same as you, I'm not here to pass judgment. I mean, heck, I like nice things just as much as the next person. But I think for me personally, once I kind of sort of started embracing a more simplistic lifestyle, I found myself actually focusing on things that were more important, that like cultivating meaningful relationships with others and, you know, working on myself, working on my health and wellness. Because, you know, a lot of these material possessions, you know, they come with a lot of maintenance, you know? So would you say that, have you maybe experienced something similar? Maybe your focus on certain things kind of shifted a little bit when you kind of started making this adjustment in your life?
yes, I'm connected to so many more people now around the world through social media and just people that I've met. And I feel like I have so many experiences that are just invaluable, just encounters with people, travel experiences that have really brought me to tears. I've never had a physical object that's brought me to tears.
Right.
And
Good
that's the
point.
way I look at it. Yeah. I feel like it's just so much more meaningful. And I like how you mentioned that owning stuff brings a lot of maintenance. I feel like, you know, as someone, because, you know, you're running these podcasts and stuff like that, you know, that obviously requires maintenance, just like my blog requires maintenance. But I'm like, I feel like I'm pouring my heart and my soul into experiencing things and sharing those experiences with others. And it's just so much of a relief compared to maintaining everything that I was doing before, where I just kind of felt like I was going through the motions every day. And I felt like I was just, you know, just going through life and not really sure what I was wanting to do. And so I actually feel as if I have just more meaning and purpose now. I feel a lot happier overall. So I absolutely agree with you.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, you know, it certainly is possible if you've thought about it. It just kind of involves taking the leap. But then at the same time, though, it's just you know, because and it's not like I just took all the stuff that I wanted to get rid of and just toss it in the trash or anything like that. You know, I kind of shuffled back and forth to like Goodwill, or if I had like a cousin or some other family member who thought that they could use it, I'm like, oh yeah, well here you go, you know, have at it. So resources being reused and recycled, so it's not just, you know, tossing it away or anything like that. All right. Well, what I kind of want to move on to now is, you know, you've actually got to travel pretty recently, and I think it pretty much goes without saying that, you know, 2020 has been a bit of a year. You know, it's been a bit of a year. And, you know, with, you know, pandemics and, you know, unrest and, you know, a lot of political stuff, and we don't have to dive too deep in the rabbit hole on a lot of those things. You know, we kind of already done that already before we hit record here. But you were in East Africa, around the time, as you mentioned, when COVID kind of started kicking off. And it was also even like later on, you know, throughout this whole pandemic situation, you even made your way back to Mexico. Can you kind of take us through, and maybe we can start with East Africa first, since that came first in the timeline. Like, what was that experience like? And just kind of being there, knowing that this thing was happening around the world. And I guess just what were some of your thoughts and feelings kind of when going through that?
Yeah, so I took off. I went to Tanzania first, then Kenya, then Rwanda. Then I crossed the border into Uganda, crossed the border back into Rwanda, was supposed to fly to the other side of Uganda. And that was when the pandemic had shut the world down. And I booked a flight to come all the way back to the US. So I started in Tanzania in January. And it was right around when COVID-19 was being announced. And it just felt like it was just going on in China. And it was like, hey, there's been bird flu, swine flu, and it's been this whole crazy ordeal, but it never really got that crazy. It never shut the world down,
Right.
So it's like, I wasn't really concerned about it. And so I just didn't really think about it. I was just having fun in Tanzania. I went to Dar es Salaam, then I went to Zanzibar, and then I went on a safari. And when I crossed the border into Kenya, because from Arusha, after I was done with my safari, I crossed the border into Kenya and went to Nairobi. That was maybe mid-February, I think. Maybe the third week of February. No, it was about mid-February, yeah. And at that point, they were taking temperatures, they were screening, they were asking questions at immigration about any symptoms I might have. And what's crazy was I actually did get sick when I was in Tanzania. And I had a lot of the symptoms that would have went with COVID. And at the time, I didn't really think that it was a possibility that I could have had it, just because no countries in Africa were reporting it. But there was really no testing around either. And there was a lot of, in Zanzibar, there's a lot of European tourists, and of course Europe in February, it was really starting to explode there. But they were taking temperatures and they were asking a lot of questions, and the immigration officers were wearing masks at the time. And then in early March, spent 2 weeks in Kenya. In early March, I flew from Nairobi to Kigali, Rwanda. And Rwanda, and this is like when things were really starting to progress, I still wasn't that worried yet. And especially when I was in Kenya, I wasn't worried. No one was worried. It wasn't there in Africa. Yeah, I'm sure it was, but at the time, no one thought it was there. And when I got to Rwanda, this is what really impressed me. Rwanda is so progressive in a lot of ways as it is. They've come a long way from the genocide days. They're just so focused on education, and there was a lot of things there. I felt that Rwanda was the safest country I've ever been to in Africa. And they're just very strict in a lot of ways. And a lot of their technology is progressive. So when I got off the plane the first week of March, I think it was maybe March 3rd, there was doctors there waiting with masks to ask questions and stuff, and they were, keeping their space, and they were screening us for COVID. And then he goes, okay, your temperature's fine. You can go through immigration. I was like, what do you mean my temperature fine? You didn't even take it. And he pointed to this big machine that was like 10, 15 feet away that was taking all passengers' temperatures. Yeah.
Say what?
I was like, this is, like you said, how people have this idea of Africa. No one would think that the heart of Africa there.
Yeah, that sounds kind of sci-fi-ish right there.
I was shocked. I was just like, I feel like almost like in the US, there'd have to be some sort of disclaimer. By the way, we're taking your temperature right now, whereas they just automatically take it there. There was no signs, no nothing.
Wow. Yeah, well, and that's kind of a tough situation to be in. You were mentioning how you were kind of getting sick too, but at the same time, it's like there's plenty of other radical diseases that you could get in like some of these places. I mean, gosh, like when I was just in West Africa, let's see, I had like a malaria scare. I had to get tested for malaria. Thank goodness that was negative. And then every also like waterborne parasites infections that left me curled up on the floor, and just because I was in so much pain. And, and then also frequent trips to my latrine, and I'll just, let people use their imagination. I don't have to get into detail on that. So I guess it's just, yeah, that must have been a pretty tough situation because, I mean, feeling sick but it didn't sound like even when you were sick, did you like face any issues on some of these questionnaires when people tried to like either detain you or anything like that to keep you from like going forward? Because at this point, you know, it could have been anything that could have been causing the symptoms, really.
Yeah. So what happened was when I was in Tanzania, I went to the best private hospital that was in Arusha. So I had just finished up my safari. I went to the Serengeti and Ngorongoro crater, which was just incredible. Just
I bet.
Yeah, one of my favorite things I've ever done. And I got so sick at the end of it. So when I was in the hospital, they did my blood work and stuff because they wanted to test for malaria and everything. I had a dry cough, which is what was crazy. I was throwing up. I had major stomach issues and I had a fever. So I was supposed to take the bus from Arusha to Nairobi the day after I was done with the hospital, and they gave me all kinds of antibiotics and medication, which by the way is so much cheaper. Even though the medication says it's being created in the US, it was like so much cheaper in Africa. It was like $25 to pay out of pocket. And I was like, what the heck? We're getting hosed.
You might want to stockpile while you're there, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, my whole medical bill, I mean, it was like $100 and something. It was just
oh wow.
crazy. I know. I was like, because of course I got reimbursed through travel insurance, but I was just like, what? I was like, this is crazy. But so I did not take the bus. I actually contacted the bus company. I can't even remember the name. I know I have it written down. And actually, what's crazy is I'm so behind on my blog post. I'm actually working on my Africa blog post this weekend. So I got really upset about, you know, the whole thing, like the whole world shutting down. So now I'm finally snapping out of it. I'm working on it. But the bus company was awesome. I contacted them multiple times. Like every day I was like, I don't feel comfortable enough getting on the bus. I've been sick. I still think I have a fever. I waited until I started feeling better and I broke my fever. It still wasn't like feeling great, but whatever I had, they never really properly diagnosed me. They just said I had some sort of bacterial infection. So I guess they noticed that bacteria was showing up in my blood when they did blood work, but they never really diagnosed me with what it was. So
yeah, it could mean anything really at that point, really. So yeah. It's just like you just take it with a grain of salt, really.
Yeah. So I would have never gotten on a bus with a fever. But now, especially with COVID, I know it would be very taboo. Like you don't leave your house if you have a fever at all. But like, I knew about because, the bus like was packed too. Like there was no empty seat. There was no air conditioning. And I'm like, I first of all don't want to spread whatever I have to anyone else. And I certainly don't want to sit on a bus with no air conditioning for 8 hours with a fever either.
Sounds awful. Oh, wow. That's quite the experience for sure. But, despite, what you went through in Africa, at the beginning of this whole thing, it didn't seem like that deterred you from getting out and traveling even more. And like I said, you just recently came back from Mexico. I think I'm actually kind of catching you just upon the return. So, how did you feel about getting out there in the world again with the pandemic still ongoing and, travel restrictions are a little bit, tight knit right now. So, what was that experience like for you?
So there's a couple things involved there. I kind of feel that, so I actually ended up with the virus. I don't know if you know that too. I posted about it.
Yeah, I think I remember seeing your post on that. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, it's kind of crazy. Because I really wasn't doing very much and I still ended up with the virus. And I know people who were just out there every day doing so much and they didn't end up with it. But I also shared on social media how I think I got it. I think I got it through my doctor's office because 2 people tested positive the week that I was there. So it makes a lot of sense. So really it was just kind of frustrating for me because I'm like, I'm not doing anything. I feel like I'm mostly being irresponsible and staying at home. I might have went out to eat a couple of times. But I also feel like if this is going to last for a year or two, people have to get out there and do something. So we need to go out to eat, go to gyms and still do things, but do them safely. So like there's capacity limits, of course. People are wearing masks and people are doing certain things. But if we don't do anything at all, it's just going to be so just everyone's going to just kind of lose their jobs. We're going to have it worse than the Great Depression, where restaurants aren't open anymore. Gyms are closed. Airlines aren't running anymore. And I kind of feel like it's a balance of we need to learn how to live with this. We need to do a little bit. So I kind of felt like after sitting there being sick and thinking about how I wasn't going out and doing very much, and I ended up being sick anyways. And then I also kind of thought about it where all these articles and research were coming out where it was such a minimal amount of people that were being reinfected back to back. So some people had tested positive more than once. But the research was coming out saying that it was mostly because the virus was just still lingering in their body, but not necessarily that they were contagious anymore, and they weren't reinfected. Now, there's been the case of the man in Hong Kong and a handful of people that were reinfected here in the US, but just like every other virus, mostly people are not reinfected back to back. And it's new, it's novel, so they're still doing research, but all the recent research that's been coming out the last couple of weeks has been that people aren't being reinfected back to back. It's rare. And then if I'm donating my plasma, which I did, I donated plasma twice now. And I donated to one person in particular. So my plasma goes to 3 people, but one person in particular I knew, because you could list on there that you want your plasma to go to someone. So I went to someone's grandmother that I know in Florida, and it saved their life.
Oh,
so
cool.
between the steroids and the plasma. So for me, I'm like, if the plasma's the antibodies are in my body and I'm donating it to someone and it helps them fight the virus off and saves their life, then obviously it's doing something in my own body too. So I kind of, in a sense, was like, I'm going to get out there just a little bit and travel a little bit. And I feel very much more confident and comfortable that, hey, I have these antibodies now. And the research is coming out more in my favor. So I was like, I'm going to go to Mexico. I know it's open. I've actually thought about moving there, which is the main reason why I wanted to go. So I've been homeless. And during a pandemic, I need to figure out where I'm going to move to. So I had decided on Mexico. I had my heart set on it. And so really I had gone out there to scope out where I wanted to live, which was Playa del Carmen. I thought it was a really good city as a digital nomad. They have really good Wi-Fi. A lot of people think that Tulum is a good digital nomad city, but the Wi-Fi there is not good.
I really do like how Wi-Fi is basically up on the top of list of considerations for you. That's awesome.
It has to be, because I can't work otherwise. So yeah, I know it's the opposite of a lot of people. A lot of people, they're just like, Wi-Fi is hit or miss. It's okay. But for me, because I'm a digital nomad, it's a huge deal. So yeah, I was planning on moving to Mexico, but then some other stuff came up, and I'm most likely not moving there now.
Okay, well, beyond the realm of COVID and stuff like that, I'm guessing. So
yeah, actually, it's a big business opportunity.
Oh, sweet. Well, cool. Care to fill us in, or is that a surprise or something?
No, it's fine. I can share about it a little bit. It's not set in stone. So I was approached by a company. It's not set in stone, but it's most likely going to happen. I was approached by a company that owns RV resorts, and they want to collaborate with someone who can travel around in an RV and capture travel-related content for their resorts and just for the surrounding area. They want to capture photos and videos, and they want to create blog posts, but they also want someone to sort of do business development initiatives to increase their memberships for their RV resorts. And so I've been going back and forth with them, and it looks as if I'm going to be coming on board with them and working with them, which is kind of funny because I had already flown to Mexico and I said, hey, I'm moving here. This is what I'm doing. And then a week after being there, this opportunity came up. And it's kind of difficult for me to turn it down. I've been going back and forth between I should just move to Mexico and stay there. I can finally learn how to speak much better Spanish than I'm already speaking, which is really bad. And I love Mexico so much. And so I was really excited to finally move there. And then this opportunity turned up, and I was like, really need to do this. It's such a great opportunity. It's not 100% set in stone, but this is most likely what I'm doing next.
All right. Right on. Well, hopefully you could hopefully these RV resorts, got good Wi-Fi, Oh, yeah. All right. Awesome. So, well, you and I we'll have to stay in touch because I'm definitely curious to see how that works out for you. And I really hope that it works out for the best, right on, All right. Well, kind of nearing towards the end of our conversation, we kind of talked a little bit about life lessons that we've learned, especially when we kind of talked about, minimalism and kind of clearing out the clutter, so to speak. But kind of reflecting on some of your adventures that you've had, what would you say are some other like life lessons and takeaways that you've kind of been able to take and implement into your own life? And, that may be a loaded question because there's a lot that can come from traveling. But what kind of comes to mind?
I think what's really impacted me the most with travel is understanding the world better. I guess what has really kind of made me sad in a lot of ways is that I realized the media, Hollywood, just portrays such an inaccurate just picture and gives us the wrong narrative in a lot of ways of so many places. And it's frustrating because I've walked around Lebanon. I spent so much time in Lebanon and I just love it so much. But if you were to ask the average American or probably Westerner what they think of Lebanon, they would be so scared to just step foot in the country. They think of terrorism, they think of Hezbollah, they think of, it's listed as level 3. Some areas are listed as a level 4, do not travel because of, Hezbollah and terrorism. And it's just, I think some of the best life lessons is really learning the truth about the world. Because when I was there, I can honestly say that Lebanon, I would recommend, is one of the best destinations for a solo female traveler. I think in all of the Middle East is the easiest for me, even better than going to UAE. Just because a lot of people think of UAE as maybe this is the safest and best place to go in the Middle East. And but for me, Lebanon, hands down, and just a lot of Latin American countries as well. I think that, like, if you were to ask me 10 years ago what I thought about Guatemala, I would be thinking of gangs and poverty and just not a pretty place. But then when I went to Antigua and I hiked the volcanoes and I went to Lake Atitlan, I was just blown away. I'm like, this is one of the cheapest countries I've ever been to. The locals are super friendly, and this is just so beautiful. And don't get me wrong, I know there's dangerous places in Guatemala. I'm not gallivanting around Guatemala City. I wasn't taking the chicken buses around, but the places I went to were so incredibly beautiful. And I think those are the life lessons that I've learned, is that a lot of times the media will only focus on the bad things from certain regions and certain countries. And there's so much that we can get out there and learn and understand about the world just through travel. And you really can't get that. Maybe you can get that by watching some YouTube videos from other travelers. But then again, it's like they're still only giving you their perspective. And I truly think that that's what's impacted me the most, and the biggest life lesson is really, truly learning about the world by just getting out there myself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, kind of going back to your point when you were kind of talking about, seeing videos or photos or stuff like that, though, too. I mean, cameras now can shoot in like 8K or something outrageous like that. You can tell I don't really keep up with all these technological trends quite too much, but it's just, regardless, nothing that you see on your computer screen or TV will ever do a place justice compared to you seeing it for yourself. It's when you're actually in there, you can see it, smell it, feel it, touch it, taste it, whatever. It's far more impactful than anything that you can ever get, from a TV screen. So I couldn't agree with you more there. Right on. All right. Well, what I want to move on to next is, we kind of hinted a little bit at your blog throughout this conversation, but why don't you kind of give us a little bit more of a deeper dive? Tell us a little bit about your blog, Kerry Somewhere, and, what can our listeners expect if they were to go check it out today?
Well, I was neglecting my blog for the longest time. I created it, didn't do very much because I was traveling full-time, working full-time, and I was like, this is just, a fun sort of thing. Every once in a while, I'll create some posts. And now, lately, I've been creating a lot of posts, and I've been getting serious about it. And I just realized a lot of people were asking me questions all the time, and I'm like, I really need to try to make money off of this. Maybe it's not like, not necessarily I'm like, hey, I want to become a millionaire after this, because most bloggers aren't doing that. But I was just like, I'm giving out like so much advice and it's taking up so much time and I'm trying to help people. But I'm like, it'll actually save me time if I have it all consolidated in posts. And then maybe I can make some kickbacks from it too. And if I don't, I don't, but at least it's saving me time. And then, also, so I just recently I've been sharing a lot. I think a lot of it has to do with solo female travel. I think that, as I had mentioned earlier, it's really important for people to try to follow people based on their travel styles. So people aren't going to get a lot of luxury content from me. Every once in a while they might. And I think that a lot of people do that. A lot of people will go between, hey, sometimes I just really want to stay in a 4-star hotel. Maybe I'm staying with people. And sometimes I might do budget. Some people are very extreme and they'll do backpacking, and then they'll find a lot of information on my website in regards to that. And then I think if someone is luxury traveling or they want to stay at a 3 or 4-star hotel, they will find some stuff on my website too. But it's a lot of adventure, a lot of budget travel, a lot of helping people understand how to travel more for less, like traveling to more inexpensive countries, using Airbnb, using hostels, and then maybe using local transportation. I recommend using Uber in a lot of places as well. I'm sure you've gotten into fights with taxi drivers across the world.
Oh yeah. Indeed.
So a lot of tips like that of how to avoid scams, how to save money, and just how to travel longer and safer.
Okay, right on. And where can we find it? What's the URL that it's under?
So it's kerrysomewhere.com. So Kerry, and then the word somewhere.com.
Okay. All right. And I'll get that linked up in the show notes for this episode so the listeners can go and find them there. So now as we get further on in our wrap up, one thing I've been doing with my guests is I've been asking my guests to issue a challenge to our listeners, because we're sharing stories, we're presenting ideas, but stories and ideas and inspiration can only take someone so far. Action has to follow it, right? So what challenge would you issue to our listeners for them to go out there and start living a more adventurous life?
It's a really good question. So actually, I think I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I think right now is a good time to start any sort of challenge. And I know it sounds odd because we're in the middle of a pandemic, but I'm sure like this has been your experience, just like it's been my experience. In order to plan to move abroad or long-term travel, or to plan a lot of really just kind of more crazier types of trips where if you're going in the middle of Africa or something.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of planning is involved. And for me, it took me months and weeks to really plan and learn how to become a digital nomad. I learned how to create a website and start a blog, and I did a lot of research on travel safety and how to, what to do with Wi-Fi, because if there isn't bad Wi-Fi, or if there is bad Wi-Fi where I am, I researched other options like traveling with a portable device, getting a local SIM. All of these things took so much time and effort to research and prepare for. So I think right now is the perfect time, because we're in the middle of a pandemic and we really can't do that much. Maybe we can travel a little bit like I just did, but really obviously it's not the same, and it's going to take a while. Right now is the time if you want to start a blog, you want to start a website, if you've only traveled a little bit, or maybe you've traveled extensively, right now start it. I'm actually working on some resources to help other people start their own blogs as well, which I'll be publishing over the weekend and early next week, because I think this is the perfect time to do that. And even if that's not even what you want to do and you just want to start traveling, you're not stuck. It's going to open back up again. I mean, it's not a given, but most likely it is. I can't see the world going without people traveling again, at least in the next year or two, maybe 3. I hope not. But if you really want to get out there, you can just start planning and preparing now. Make a game plan, make a list of countries, start making boards on Pinterest, start getting organized and start planning out where you want to go and how you want to do it. And if you want to do long-term travel, start getting advice from other people that have done it, and just do a lot of research. That's what I did. And it worked out really well, and I was able to finally do it.
Right. And sometimes, that's just the biggest thing, isn't it? Is just, I think, a lot of times people get inundated with a lot of these questions, and they end up suffering from paralysis by analysis. It's like, well, should I do this and everything? They think of all these things. It's like, just get started. The stars are never going to align for you to start anything. You just got to start anyway. And even if it's something small, just drive to the next town over and go try that ethnic food restaurant or something. It could be anything. So so right on. All right. So what I have for you next is my final three. These are three. I like to think that they're fun questions, but I guess that could be up for interpretation. But I ask all my guests these at the end of the show, so you're going to get asked these as well. And the first of those questions is, what is your favorite place that you've been to so far?
So I want to mention all your questions have been fun so far. So
well, good.
Someone tells you otherwise, they're wrong. That's really tough to pick my favorite place. So if I were to pick my favorite country, it would be Egypt. My favorite place I've ever been to, I think, might just be like, my favorite region would be East Africa. Mm-hmm. My favorite place would be a toss-up between Bwindi National Park to see the gorillas, and then maybe the Serengeti and Ngorongoro crater. I don't know. So difficult. My trip right before COVID, I feel so lucky that I took it before the pandemic happened, because gosh, it's just been shut down for so long, but it was just probably my most incredible trip so far. So it's tough to pick just one place.
Yeah, fair enough. It certainly is. Now, really quick, this Bwindi National Park, was that in Uganda or was that in Rwanda?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay, good. All right. Yeah, because that's on a bucket list too. It's just, these gorillas, I mean, they're such powerful animals, they're cool, so yeah, I think, I'd like to see them someday as well. So right on. All right. So the next question that I have for you, going along with this final three, what is one thing on your bucket list that you have yet to do?
A lot, but
I just asked for one, Kerry, just one.
one big thing, and it's probably the most expensive one on my bucket list, is going to Antarctica. That's the last continent the final continent I haven't been to, and it is so expensive. So that's one of the main reasons why. Have you been to Antarctica?
Not yet. Funny thing about Antarctica was I've applied for jobs there. I was in it.
Really?
I was an administrator when I was in the Marine Corps. And so I tried to find for just like some sort of like admin clerk position, just something pretty menial there at like one of like the science stations or something like that. But like lo and behold, I didn't realize that there was actually a huge wait list of people who actually wanted to apply for jobs like there. It was like highly competitive to get a job position there, which you think it wouldn't be so competitive. But I guess, well, there's probably loads of other people that have the same mindset that I do. They want to travel to Antarctica. They want to experience the continent, and they want someone else to pay for it. So I didn't end up getting the job, as you can tell. So.
It is so expensive. So I don't blame you for trying, and I don't blame a lot of other people for trying for that too. Because it really is a bucket list thing to say, I've been to Antarctica. But I think eventually we'll go. It's just a matter of saving up money. And hey, that's another good goal for people during the pandemic. Someone wants to travel more. This is a good time to try to save money. I know sometimes it's like a lot of people are hit hard, so maybe not so much. But if people are okay, like for me, I'm trying to save for some of my bucket list adventures. And, my travel blog was hit. I'm not making the money that I was making before, but there's other ways I'm trying to save. So that's my biggest thing on my bucket list.
Okay, right on. And that's a good one too. I like it. All right. And the last question, and this is a two-parter, and I think you'll appreciate this one based on what you've told me earlier on in our conversation. What is your favorite animal, and have you seen this animal in the wild?
So after my trip to Bwindi, I decided that the gorillas were the mountain gorillas in particular were my favorite. And honestly, it was not something that was high up on my bucket list. I thought it would be really cool to do, but it wasn't until I was actually there that I realized how special and incredible it was. So yes, I have seen this animal in the wild. So the mountain gorillas share 98% of our DNA. They don't exist in zoos at all because they can't survive. This type of gorilla, So you can only see them in Uganda, Rwanda, and Congo. And it's such a privilege to see them because in Rwanda, you have to pay $1,500 just for the permit, not including the tour.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, you have to have really technically you have to have a tour company take you out, because once you get there, then you have a local guide that takes you on the actual trek. In Uganda, it was half the price. It was $600, but now it's moving to $700 this next coming year. But who knows if we'll be able to do it this coming year, because since they share 98% of our DNA, even if the pandemic starts getting better, I don't know what the restrictions will be in place, because obviously we could pass the virus on to the gorillas. So they're going to have to be really careful and very protective. I got to do this March 8th, I think. So right before the world shut down. And no one's going to do this for a while. I feel so lucky that I got to do it then, because this will be one of the last things that they'll open up, of course. And even in Congo, I know they make you wear masks if you're doing gorilla trekking in general. Some people have posted on Instagram. This was before COVID, just because we can pass diseases on to them so easily. But it was honestly the most incredible thing I've ever done anywhere. It absolutely blew me away. You hike for a few hours. Sometimes it's a 1 or 2 hour hike. It just depends until you find the gorilla family. And then you see a whole family. You see babies, you see the silverback, you see mamas. And the babies get really just kind of playful, like, oh, humans, let me show off. And they beat their chests and they act crazy. And yeah, some of them try to get too close and they'll try to grab you because they're just babies. They're trying to play. So you have to back off, because of course you don't ever want to touch wildlife. And the tour guides make sure that there's a distance and they keep your space. But the silverbacks and the mamas don't really care. They're just eating and they're just like looking off in the distance. But it's just incredible to be that close and to actually just see them. So yeah, if anyone has like a bucket list and they love wildlife, that's definitely one to put on there.
Okay. Right on. Well, fingers crossed that things shape up for us around the world and experiences like that get opened back up to us again, and I'm sure that, the locals there would probably appreciate that too, because $700 for just the permit alone, that's a hefty amount of money for them. So, just fingers crossed that, we can have experiences like that again, for sure. All right. Well, before we close out here, Kerry, let's just recap again, really quick, if I can speak quick, where our listeners can go to connect with you. So website, social media handles, you're out there, you're putting out a lot of valuable stuff. Where can our listeners reach out and connect with you?
So website, kerrysomewhere.com, Kerry, like the Irish way of spelling my name. And then somewhere.com. I have my social media all listed on my website, but it's at Kerry Somewhere on Instagram, at Kerry Somewhere on Twitter, Pinterest, and Facebook. I post all my travel content there, my blogs, and I'm pushing out a lot of content right now, especially content focused on blogging, how to become a digital nomad, how to travel longer for cheaper and as safe as possible.
Okay, right on. And as I mentioned, I will get all of those linked up in the show notes for this episode so the listeners can go and find them there. Well, Kerry, I tell you what, I really enjoyed our conversation today. We've been connected for a good while, and I'm, was really looking forward to the chance to sit down with you, so to speak, and kind of take a trip down memory lane and, share some good stories. I had a lot of fun and I learned a lot, and I just really thank you very much for being here and sharing all this with myself and the listeners. This has been fantastic.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. This has been great.
Yeah, absolutely.